I'm going to go ahead because we're going to have to keep on schedule here. So I am going to kind of get started with opening remarks, so to speak, and introductions here. So first of all, to our sharks who are all here, thank you for joining us tonight. Like I said, for all of the students, you're going to recognize several of the sharks. We've got Mr. Doctor Professor Anthony Vanke. I guess I would say down my lower left-hand corner, but it depends on your screen. So you'll remember Anthony from week 3, I believe it was. We've got Janine Chastain, who is up in the upper right of my corner, and Evelyn Lee, who's down in the bottom left of my screen, both from Practice Interrupted. So thank you to the two of you for being here. Thank you, Anthony. And then up in the upper left corner of my screen, for whatever that's worth, is Mark R. LePage. He's the founder of Architect. He's a good friend of mine. And I think there are a couple of you that are members of the Architect community Facebook page. Mark has had a blog and a podcast and now an academy for small firm architects for a lot of years now. I'll put it that way. It's, I guess if we were to kind of put a round number on it, it'd be about 10 years. So the 4 sharks that we have, 8 years, the 4 sharks that we have assembled, as you know, from our presentations in week 1 with Janine and Evelyn, and week 3 with Anthony, are very in tune with the future of the profession. They're very in tune with entrepreneurial ventures in the profession, and the same is true for Mark. You might have guessed it, Architect. It's all about building better businesses in the world of architecture. So I think we've got 4 very qualified, very creative, very interesting sharks with us tonight, and then there's me. And I am looking forward to this tonight. So first of all, I want to say congratulations to all of you, because I'm proud of everything that you've put together for tonight. We've been working on this for an entire semester. I know that this class represents a giant curveball for you. Probably never seen anything like this in terms of pro practice. We may have glossed over some things that you hoped that we would have dug deeper into, and I know that this project has presented a challenge for some of you. So congratulations. I'm sorry. Here we are. It's pitch night. So like I said in my message to you yesterday, I think I sent that out yesterday, we have a schedule. We're going to start here momentarily. I've allotted about 15 minutes per slot, which means you'll have a couple of minutes to set up, which basically means sharing your screen. You'll have 3 minutes to pitch, and then that'll leave us about 10 minutes for questions and answers. So as I said, you're not going to be graded on whether or not you hit 3 minutes. You know, that's the goal, obviously, but that's partially time control to keep us on schedule. But what you will be graded on, of course, is the effort, the creativity, all the things that have gone into your project, including what goes into the pitch tonight. And we'll be looking forward to the comments from the sharks. Their comments on your projects, on your presentations. This will not be foreign to you, right? You had your finals, I think, on Monday for studio. This is very much like a studio presentation, so to speak. And when it comes to grading the projects, of course, the comments from the sharks will be taken into account there. But I have high hopes and high expectations of all of you. But I really am looking forward, because I think we've got 9 projects here. And I think we've got 9 solid projects here, and I'm really happy about this, especially with this being probably for almost all of you, if not all of you, first time even thinking about anything like this. So So it's going to be a good night. It's going to be a good night. Any questions or comments from students? Nope. Any questions or comments from sharks? Nope. Okay. Here's what I would like to do. I'm going to give you, I know you've seen the schedule, the first three up, starting first off, and I apologize for the order. It's a random order. So I have a feeling this may not have landed the way some of you wanted it to, but first up will be catch. Second up will be home, and in the hole will be agents of home. And so Rachel, go ahead and get set up. Let me make sure I've got the sharing set up properly here. All right, hopefully you can share. And then of course, if you're presenting, make sure your microphone is on. And if you're not, please keep your microphone muted until time for comments. I can't hear you, Rachel. Still can't hear you.
Now?
Yes. Now you're going away again.
Okay, now?
Yes.
Well, that was a good icebreaker. So, all right, let's get started.
Which is a good lesson. Do not panic if we have technical difficulties.
Grace can attest that happens quite a lot when we try to Zoom together.
Yep.
So, all right. The healthcare sector today is competitive, and yet the sector is facing a crisis when it comes to patient retention. Healthcare groups try to implement changes in order to improve their patient retention numbers, but they're not sure of the best practices to implement. This is where Catch comes into the picture. Catch is a research and design company specializing in reshaping healthcare design to improve the patient experience and thus patient retention rates. We at Catch serve healthcare groups and thus by proxy serve the patients they are providing services for. Patients are not inclined to stay loyal to a certain healthcare group in today's day and age, as they have concerns over their comfort levels in the healthcare environment, the cost of service, the level of trust between themselves and their doctors. So, healthcare groups need to work on improving their clinical environments and their best practices to better align with the ideals of the patients. They also need to improve their workflows in order to serve the patient in a more efficient manner while also improving their bottom line. We at Catch can help healthcare groups find unique solutions to their unique problems in order to increase their numbers. We do this by implementing the 4G system. We work with clients to form goals, we gather data through a diverse set of research methods, we generate insights from the data that we collect, and then we develop the tangible solutions to help them grow their numbers. The research methods that we utilize are surveys sent out by the hospital group to the patients after they visit a healthcare provider, in-depth interviews with both providers and patients, and observational studies in the public areas of healthcare environments. We at Catch are structured with 3 divisions. We have a research and analytics team, which focuses on client work with healthcare groups, as we've described already, the standards and product development team, who focuses on creating new standards for healthcare design and new healthcare products resulting from our database, to be described in a minute, and the business development team, which focuses on client outreach, marketing, writings for publication, and the like. As mentioned, through our client work and data collection, Catch manages a database of information related to healthcare design, repeated problems, insights, and repeated solutions that can be analyzed for patterns. These patterns can then be developed further into standards for new and improved design or into products, allowing for the research and problem solving completed by the team at Catch to reach a wider set of patients. The income streams shown on this slide detail the income streams related to the business as it sits today. not the future standards and product development, as to be described in a minute. The majority of the income comes from client work with healthcare groups, a portion comes from government and local grants, a portion from managing and selling information from our database, and a small portion comes from publications and written works. Our 5-year timeline shows that we plan to start client research in the first quarter of next year and begin our client database by the end of next year. We hope to have our database be large enough to begin analyzing by 2023 and start product development in quarter 1 of 2024. We feel that this is a conservative timeline, which of course could be condensed depending on how many clients we are able to work with at a time and how quickly our database grows. In conclusion, Catch is a research and design firm where we strive to help our patients and their clients, help our clients and their clients, the patients, to have an all-around more enjoyable experience in the healthcare environment. Done.
All right. Sharks, the floor is yours.
Rachel, great job on organizing a presentation that was well structured, and I'm appreciative that you had your talking points figured out. I was wondering what informed the early idea of this in terms of you're implying that patients are leaving healthcare providers. So what informed that research and that analysis?
Yeah, so initially I work in healthcare design mostly in my day job. And I have found that when I work with healthcare providers to design new spaces, that a lot of them focus on their wants and needs. And they're not focused on what the patient may want or need or what can make the experience better for the patient. So, every doctor wants his office, but maybe that space would be better utilized as an exam room or a treatment room or something like that.
Can I ask a question too? Thank you so much for your presentation. And I think that actually that answer was really insightful because I didn't actually understand, where you're intervening in the pipeline of healthcare. Mm-hmm. So I think that, your answer was quite helpful. My question is how do you, through your research and your products, extract the value? Where's the value capture? What I mean by that is there going to be, or do you have evidence of, or kind of through, your experiences, not just a want to maybe improve these rooms or these spaces, but how does that increase, the revenue that these offices will get, particularly when healthcare is so highly regulated that a lot of the kind of choices you have and the options you have are limited by regulation, OSHA, as well as those devices. So how much flexibility do you have, and how does that actually translate to increased revenue for the doctors that will ultimately become a revenue stream for you? Also recognizing that healthcare costs are also fairly contained by the insurance companies. So,
right, yes. So insurance is something that has to be brought up whenever healthcare is involved, and that's part of patient retention itself. But my initial plan was to, I guess, where should I start with this? So I got to this point because our businesses needed to have somebody pay for them. And that is where the client is the healthcare group, and they are what pays for us. But we want to keep the patient in the front of our mind. So how do we do that? And that's where the product and development and standards came in, was we're going to work with our clients and then gather all of the data into a general database. So then we can find patterns, create find repeated solutions that could be implemented wider than our own client reach. The standards portion is, I think, a big part that could improve the experience a lot for a patient. And that comes from my knowledge of just the sector. So I am also a registered interior designer, and there's a certification called Certified Healthcare Interior Designer. And to get that, you only have to study the code book. There's nothing else related to improving the environments, or, what colors or what experiences could be best, or how does patient workflow or, the team's workflow influence the patient, or, adjacencies of clinics improve the experience for the patient, and things like that. So I thought that developing a standards book could help improve the sector as a whole.
I almost think that like you're talking about, a systemic way of looking at improving the quality of space. I wonder if actually by looking at healthcare, and I understand that you have experience with it, because it's so highly regulated and that there's so many players in the revenue stream for the doctors, like I don't know if there's space for revenue capture that ultimately makes it into your business, right? And it's also why you versus another company. And then we also, with the database of health, HIPAA laws also then potentially get into play. I wonder if the regulatory barriers are so high, if this actually makes sense as a beachhead versus I think you're thinking of maybe like in a retail space or other services that can actually charge a 20% premium and can easily do it. It's like we improve the space, we can charge a premium for retention and all of that. Healthcare, just because usually in America, the customer isn't paying for that, and insurance companies certainly don't want to pay a premium, that I think that those aspects become a real hindrance to growth and implementation potentially.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. And these are conversations that Jeff and I have had through the semester, and the pricing and the HIPAA laws, they're definitely things that started coming to light when I started thinking through the design. Like
it's a great start.
How the company would function.
Yeah, I think it's just because it's a semester. I think for many, not just you, so I'll be saying this a lot, it's a chance to iterate. And I think that, this is a great chance to potentially pivot, because I think your thinking is great of how you collect information and improve. I just don't know if your beachhead in healthcare, is the best place to start necessarily, especially when you're trying to get traction.
I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah.
We've got another minute or two if any of the other sharks would like to weigh in.
Evelyn, do you have anything?
Oh, no. Well, I was just going to, so beyond kind of the database and the book, sorry. What were other products do you think that could specifically come out of your investigations?
Yeah, so one of my first things that I am constantly looking for on a day-to-day is some way to have a computer stand that is in an exam room attached, like hardwired in, but also allows the doctor to sit at the computer and look at the patient at the same time. That doesn't exist, and there's a lot of attempts at it that don't work in practice.
So I guess that's valid, but I guess my follow-on to that would be that's like a completely different and a whole nother layer of a whole new product offering / business model on top of the consulting services. But just something to think through, kind of finding focus and really understanding the value of the first before layering in the additional complexities of like the actual creation of a physical product. That's my only thought.
But I think she did a really good job thinking about phasing, which I'll give you credit for, Rachel. Like, even though you're thinking about multiple revenue streams, like I like that you phased them out, that you knew that there would be like a growth process to get to those.
Yeah, I would also say that you've picked an incredibly difficult industry to work within, which is basically what Anthony was saying, is that it's so regulated and so complicated that, I definitely applaud you for the idea. And in a fictional world that, sort of take all those regulations away, and it could work, right? Sort of take away the realities of where we are with healthcare in this country. And the concept is a very good one, which is why I think Anthony's point of sort of taking that model and applying it to a different industry that doesn't have so many regulations, it could be a very interesting model where, like Anthony said, taking it to a retail market and going to, Target and big stores and say, look, we can increase your bottom line by X% by allowing us to go through this research project. And, it could be a very, very lucrative business to be able to provide that kind of information to companies like that. It doesn't solve the problem of our healthcare system, which is what your goal is, but it is a valid concept in other industries where you're not so restricted.
No, I do agree that it probably would work better in a less restricted industry or sector.
I think what I would like to do, and I would like to do this with all of the projects, and we can't do it with any of them, but I think a lot of, like Rachel's project here, I think we could spend an hour or more, digging into this, because there's a lot of meat here. There's a lot that we could work with here, but unfortunately we're restricted to a class period. So with that, unless there's a shark that has any closing thought, we'll go ahead and move on to home. So guys, you've got a couple minutes to set up for home. And Rachel, good job.
Great job, Rachel.
Thanks.
So guys, as you guys sitting there face to face, you're probably going to have to be careful with your microphones.
Turn your audio. Sorry, 1 second.
That's okay. This is like realistic for how things actually go down.
Share screen, just
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, think about, and I'm sure most of you know this, the firms that you work for or have worked for, they're having to do shortlist interviews in this way. So this is pretty real world right now. There you go.
Okay. Good. We'll begin now. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. My name is Robert Graff, and my teammate is Kevin Hunt. Together, we are home. During the course of our project, we looked at natural disasters in the United States and how we could positively change those affected by such events. On March 2nd of this year in the Nashville area, tornadoes destroyed 400 homes, injured over 300 people, and imposed $1.6 billion in damages on those nearby cities and towns. This type of event is not totally uncommon. The number of tornadoes in the U.S. for 2020 has risen to 1,188. Within that scope, 78 people have lost their lives, and there have been $27 billion in damages. These are some serious numbers, but they give designers the opportunity to help those families affected. In order to empathize with and understand the people we are trying to help, we have created a family and put them into the Nashville event. Some of their characteristics include financially responsible and with significant disposable income. They are also family-oriented and purchase life and home insurance. One potential outcome derives from the McAllister family not purchasing home. In this scenario, the family sustains injuries. They are not found immediately by the rescue team. The family members are displaced throughout the house, and they are ultimately traumatized by the event. The other outcome includes the family owning home. In this scenario, the family is without injury or death. They are found soon after the event ends by a rescue team. In all, the family is safe and relatively relaxed for such an event. Now, you probably have been wondering what home is, and Kevin now will explain that.
The home canopy is designed as a rapidly deployable shelter intended to protect several people and be resistant to most natural disaster situations. In the event of an emergency, one can set up the home canopy in 5 minutes or less and protects the users from wind, rain, fire, and debris. It utilizes 12 stiffened aluminum panels with integral polycarbonate windows, which are designed to be impact resistant, durable, and easily repairable. These 12 panels are connected to a pipe in the center that can be embedded in the ground to prevent uplift. The central pipe also allows for a rotation of the panels so they can stack together and be stored with minimal space requirements. Aluminum and polycarbonate are 100% recyclable, making for a sustainable product that can be reused and recycled time and time again. you're home, you're safe. Thank you.
All right. Thanks for bringing it home. Sharks, the floor is yours.
Sorry.
I'm trying to see who wants to go first. I guess my initial thoughts about this are, what kind of conversations have you guys had about prototyping this and testing it? Could you elaborate on that?
So as far as going through an iterative process in order to come to an MVP, we would like to start out in a maker space and get funding for the materials we need, as well as some connections, as well as funding in order to get in connection with engineers to try to work out the viability of something like this. So what you saw as our rendering of our product, that is something that we thought of as a potential product, but we fully understand that ultimately there will be an enormous amount of research done, as well as talking with people like mechanical and structural engineers to come up with a product that is viable and could be actually used by people in these types of scenarios that we're talking about.
Do you guys have an approximate cost on what it would cost to manufacture and what you would sell it for?
We don't have those types of numbers at the moment, but we believe that in the beginning, during this process of iterating and coming up with something that could actually be deployed, it's going to be costly. And so we really want to get into the mass production of this product so that we can really lower those costs. And I know there's talk about mass production reducing quality, but we think that in a manufacturing facility, whenever we're dealing with repeated aluminum sheets, that the quality, if anything, would increase for us. So we were viewing that as something that we would like to get into, as mass production, reducing costs, so that more people could have it. And that's kind of the importance of it, is that we get as many people in something like this, in these disaster-prone areas, so that we can, improve people's lives ultimately. I don't know if you could bring up the mass production slide that we had on the back end there. So, I mean, that's just some of the things that we had thought about it, and those are some of the thoughts we had on it, those bullet points.
Yeah, my first thought is that areas like that, many places have storm shelters, or there are safe rooms that are built that can withstand, tornado and hurricane force winds. So when you start comparing to the cost of building one of these compared to reinforcing a home or building a separate storm shelter, permanent storm shelter, because really the benefit of this is that it's portable, right? You can take it wherever you need it to be. But I would, that would be one of my questions, is how does it compare to what's happening now in those situations?
Okay, I see.
Related to that, I'm interested in hearing what's the competition out there for you, other than kind of storm shelters and these permanent things. Who else is in this world of kind of pop-up secure types of structures?
So the slide currently is one such example of like a kind of pop-up called a concrete canvas, where it's put up in a day. It's these layered fabric sheets of concrete that you spray water on, and then it's cured as a concrete shelter. So kind of like the permanent storm shelters already, this is able to be placed wherever, but then it's a permanent feature in a yard or something. So it's an above ground kind of underground storm shelter, because then you can build up dirt around it.
Right. So, in other words, the research that we conducted we did not come up with something that could be deployed and then taken down, and it is a massive eyesore in your backyard. In other words.
Yeah, I could not imagine having this in my backyard.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big blob. So I don't know.
Right. Or you'd have to know that it was coming ahead of time, the disaster.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Just one of my this is, I think, something that through your storytelling, basic research, back of the napkin math, especially with their tornado or something that's strong, the problem is lift. So because this is temporary, unless it's really bolted into the ground, any amount of air lift is going to compromise the structure versus something like this. I agree. This is hideous and takes a lot of time, and it's going to be with you forever. So, my worry is that with the structure, just as a back of the napkin, anything that gets underneath the cone compromises it potentially, particularly if it's only, 90 pounds of total weight. So something in the back of my head says, just like physically, like with physics, I don't know if it works. So
I also struggle a little bit with the fact that, like, you have to go outside into the storm to deploy this versus, and granted, like, it's not something you can deploy. Maybe it's something you can deploy in your house, but then you're still at the whim of the internal structure of your home. So just something to think about in terms of space deployment. And obviously within the confines of the house, a lot of people don't have the ability, like, it would mean pushing furniture out of the way. And I don't know how many people want to step into the storm to deploy. And I don't know if any studies have been done on this, but it'd be interesting to understand, like when storm hits, like how often is the family unit tend to be together? So, like, if I'm a 10-year-old kid home alone, how am I deploying even like this 90-foot or this 90-pound kind of tent?
Right.
So.
Yeah, that's actually an interesting thought. We had never come across the idea of having it inside the home. So I don't know. That'd be something to explore with that.
I think we did, just like space concerns, like you were mentioning. Not everyone's gonna want to be pushing furniture out of the way to deploy it.
Just as an FYI, at Lowe's.com, there's tornado shelters that are indoors. The smallest one goes for sub 5,000. And there's an organization called the National Storm Shelter Association that has these companies. So I would take a look because, I think you have something here. It's just, you have a lot to maybe balance, especially if you want to be cost competitive. So, using your thinking, there might be some other spaces or other ways of utilizing this form, the shape, this pop-up, in ways that actually can be very successful. So I just take a look at some of these because it looks like there is an ecosystem of safe rooms type of stuff.
Right. Gotcha.
I mean, $5,000 is not a lot. So, that becomes, a challenge for you potentially with the R&D costs if this was in the real world.
Right. I gotcha.
I appreciate that you guys try to design something to sell. That was fun.
Yeah.
Pivot into a new direction. And it's a good problem to think about, like how to solve.
And the journey on this project has been interesting because it started out, the initial conversations were about not just, there you go, taking home to Mars, right? So
nice.
I mean, this is not, it sounds funny, but I don't think that this is that crazy,
I think this is a better application.
Yeah.
Frankly. We're looking at talking to an architect who's like designing deployable cities to Mars, but you're like, you have limited resources to take up there. Like, you have to be able to bring it with you. Yeah.
I mean, particularly as like structurally sound emergency housing, the best thing we have right now are like FEMA trailers, and looking back at Katrina, there were a lot of issues with chemicals and all of that. So I do think, your type of thinking, even with the ambitions of Mars, maybe that was actually something that could actually work and rethinking it for Earth in these kind of catastrophe scenarios, or when you don't have a lot of infrastructure. As Evelyn was saying, what's powerful about this logic is that you don't have infrastructure on Mars. You also don't have infrastructure in, say, suburban Atlanta, if everything's been mowed down. So I do think that there is some things that you can learn from this example.
So there you go. That's a good lesson for you guys. There's something here, right? If you wanted to keep digging into this and keep building on it, there's some good potential here. So thank you for your presentation. Thank you for the project. And
yeah, thank you.
Agents of Home can get ready to set up, get started. Obviously, our time is already slipping, so we'll adjust as we go.
Cities face a huge logistics challenge in the modern day. On the one hand, they have to respond to the deterioration of public infrastructure in a speedy manner. And on the other hand, a city government always has the responsibility of planning for the city's future and thinking about where development may be going. The common denominator between these two things is data, which has led a lot of cities in the 21st century to think about using apps and the crowdsourcing kind of mentality to gain information about their cities, what parts are deteriorating, what parts are maybe becoming more attractive to developers, things like that. So obviously this is an idea that's been used a ton. And I see a lot of problems with the way that cities kind of go with these data collection apps a lot. The first is that they tend to be extremely specific. The city will see one problem, like potholes, and they'll make an app that's just about citizens reporting potholes. So then when they have another problem, like tracking trains, they have to make a whole new app for tracking trains. The city of Chicago has two different apps for buying a train ticket and tracking where your train is on its line. They also tend to be, when they're trying to collect data from citizens, they tend to focus on problems. They're looking for people to report things that are broken or issues, or I can't find this, stuff like that. And they're not fun. They're not something that most people are going to look for to engage with on a regular basis. So
I don't think your slides are progressing.
Oh, it says sharing is paused. Bring your shared window to the front. I thought I did. Is it better now?
It's the same spot.
Oh, resume share.
There we go.
Because I'm screen sharing now.
Yeah. So I see the screen that has the New York City 311.
Okay. So yeah, they create apps that the only people who want to engage with them is the people who think it's fun to complain to city officials in their spare time, essentially. So trying to flip these issues on their heads, what if we create an app that is involved in capturing a wide variety of data, particularly about the built environment in cities, instead of just focusing on one problem? We could have it focus on both the issues that people are having, but also assets and chances, having a way for people to highlight the good things about their cities as well as the bad things, and then making it something that people want to engage with, something like Pokemon Go or geocaching, right? That invites people to explore their city. It's attractive to wide variety of people, and it will get more people than just the people who like complaining, I guess, is what I'm saying. So introducing Agents of Home. It's the app that mobilizes citizens to provide data to help their cities. It works like this. If you're going out for your daily walk, right? Maybe you're a bit bored with your daily walk. It's the same loop that you do all the time. So you open up Agents of Home and you're given your mission, a point within a 5 to 10 minute walk of you that you're asked to travel to. And once you reach that point, you're asked to deliver a field report to headquarters. This would be focusing on collecting from citizens data like the physical condition of whatever site we've sent them to, but also things like how do they feel about the site? Is it like broken down and empty, or is it kind of a exciting area that people are congregating in a lot, right? And of course, there would be the chance to write your own paragraph or submit your own photos to the database if you wanted to. So this would all go to a central database that you'd be able to view as a city employee from the GIS system. So very quickly, the city can start to use this data that they're receiving in real time, view it as it comes in, and start making decisions. So benefits are, we're gonna be alerting the city both to problems, deteriorating infrastructure, stuff like that, but as well as opportunities. What areas of the city are people excited about? Where can the city see where maybe they need to be putting more money to? Anyway, the more engaging design will attract a larger user base than just, I guess, the normal squeaky wheels. And it can become a valuable tool to get this data, on the short term to quickly solve problems, and as the long term when you're thinking about where is our town going to go in the next 5 or 10 years. So that is Agents of Home.
All right, thank you. Sharks?
I love this idea. I think it's a great idea. The app that comes to mind while you were talking is Waze. The way that Waze works, where it's not like the other GPS apps like Google Maps or Apple Maps. It sort of takes it to the next level where it's.
Sure, but I found something for it. What maps does Apple use? Do you want to hear it?
No, Google. Sorry,
Okay.
Google heard me talking about it.
That's very meta.
Yes, and so the idea of user-generated data, giving cities real-time hotspot data, saying, okay, there are problems here, because you can imagine this being used on a mass level where every citizen has this app and every citizen is generating this data. In very real time, you can have a city seeing a map on their end of where the hotspots are. It could be, both physical as well as sort of could be, at all the different pieces of running a city can be seen through the eyes of the citizens. I think it's a really interesting concept.
You mentioned Pokemon Go, and I really enjoyed that when it came out. And I was just wondering, from the gamification standpoint, like what kind of reward system were you thinking about in terms of incentivizing people to participate?
That's a good question. I don't think I ever landed on a solid one. Obviously, it could be like just checking off places you've been. It could be getting to see the data for yourself. I think those would be I think the two things I really thought about.
Mm-hmm.
I never really solidified that end, though.
Well, the mission part of it is really enticing, because I know that there would be people. I feel like I listened to a podcast recently where they were talking about there's some kind of program out there that if you're bored, you can get a random location and go investigate. And like people are into that kind of stuff because they want to be engaged in a new way and like have some kind of that mission idea gets them excited about going out into the world and exploring. And then I think just like, Pokemon Go, like once you start capturing your characters, you get a reward system. So like, depending on like how many times you submit a photo into the database or you do anything, like, I think that there could be some interesting, like reward system that you come up with to engage people to want to keep going out there and exploring. That could be a next level of thinking about this that would be really engaging.
Yeah,
it could have points and levels. So the more engaged you are, the higher level you are. Like that's exactly what Waze does. When you report, cars on the side of the road or police or a pothole, you get points. And then the more you engage with the app, you move up in levels. And I'd like to just let everybody know that I'm a king wazer, which is why I know this, because I use it all the time, and I get a little crown on my little emoji guy. So
Well,
I could see a similar thing happening for you.
Remember when Foursquare came out?
Yeah.
You could become the mayor of a location.
Right.
It's just another example of an award to aspire to.
Actually, to use Foursquare as an example, and I think this is, so I think I'm going to be bad cop today, generally, of like everyone's presentation.
I've already picked up on that.
Yeah. You know, I've been around the block, as many of you heard like during my presentation with this. So there's been a couple apps that have tried doing this, and fundamentally the problem with all app ecosystems is a fundamental rule of the internet called the 1% rule. That of any application, only 1% actually generate 90% of the content. Mark is actually an exact case, right? He's was it a king, a mayor? But there's very few people who actually engage at that level. Most people are consumers. And actually with Pokemon Go, the adoption level, a lot of people downloaded it, but if you look at it long-term, how many people stayed in the platform, it died off very quickly. But that's not to say that you don't have something good here. I think in a way the devil's in the details. And I think the gamification, how I would present it if I was you. Number one, I would figure out the gaming system. And then I would say, this is actually a platform to work with brands and communities, that you can get rewards by working with brands or something to that effect. But I think that for me, the interesting part about the data side, because cities aren't going to pay for it. City budgets aren't there. But maybe this is a good competitor to 311 and SeeClickFix. SeeClickFix is a big monster in the room because they provide a clear data platform that ties into the databases of cities that already exist. A single common platform that they can look at everything and the analytics to do this. Where I think you're interesting is that now we can actually put on challenges, or a city can ask different questions, which is something that SeeClickFix does not do. And I think that's where there's some novelty. The challenging part is, how do you get people to play? And maybe it's... To steal from Niantic, they built a platform that was originally for Ingress, that they just skinned. They literally just changed the characters, changed things, new assets, created Pokemon Go. And I think that's where your work could be. That it's not boutique. You can literally have Mickey on it. So you don't have one app, you have 100 apps. You know, but using your platform that provides both commercial data, location data. So Foursquare never made money as an app. Makes money as a location intelligence business. And that, I think, is a power of your side. It's the information. And I think that's where you should really delve into a lot more.
I also think there's ways to investigate like the real, like the geolocation of where people are. And instead of getting them to open an app, have like a notification system that pops up and says, how's the road condition? And it's a simple like yes or no response, and then people can go on their way. But it's not like necessarily something that they have to open up and be engrossed in. But it's like it's just something we're looking at actually doing these in offices more. Like we can identify where people are in the office, and we can ask them at random times throughout the day, are they comfortable? How's the sound level? And I think it's just like the level of entry is easier because you don't have to set aside time for the experience, if that makes sense. And then I would gamify it by like using the community. Like I think the rewards should be, you know, partnering with city governments to like put all of your announcements of community events into the app too. So then it becomes like like this is where everyone is in the community is gathering, and then rather than earning crowns, maybe you earn a free coffee at the local coffee shop, which I think is a lot more tangible, more of a tangible reward to get people engaged too.
I'd rather the coffee than the crown too.
I think,
but you still have the crown.
I think
You're
it's
that 1%.
on, like, what that data is, like fundamentally, like what is the most useful thing? You know, a lot of these location businesses are actually advertising companies, because you can have whatever app you want from Facebook to whatever, and they're getting data. So even if you're in Gmail, they're getting data from that. If you're on Craigslist, they're getting data from that, so they can integrate. I think for you, that could be a way, you know, to make shit tons of money. But the other side is that maybe there is something unique that requires fewer touch points. people don't want to engage. People turn off notifications, and it's getting increasingly easy. It's harder to get location data, and it's harder to get attention with the new updates in the iOS or in the operating systems. So how do you figure out an interesting way through this that makes me want to engage without yet another thing that dings and beeps and all of that? So that's why I think thinking about your scripting as in the human scripting, the game, becomes really, really critical. And I think that there could be creative tweaks that you could begin to work on it, because people don't want to do apps anymore, or I can't handle another app.
Yeah.
Good job.
Thank you.
Yeah, fun idea.
Yeah, definitely. All right, Davis, thank you. AI Apprentice, get ready to share your screen, and you're up next. And then we're already so far behind, we may skip the break at this point. So one truck will be after AI Apprentice.
Hello, can you hear us?
Can hear you.
Okay, perfect. All right, so imagine the house in your hometown that stands out against the others. What is it that makes it stand out? Maybe it's the brick or the terracotta work, the woodwork detailing, or interior finishes. Either way, we can all agree that it's the attention to detail. What if we lost this detail and the craftspeople who created them? Now it comes to us without a shadow of a doubt that these structures are quickly fading away and will look like this house on the first screen here. This house, Carlton Island Villa on New York Island. Here you see a picture of it in the late 1800s after it was first built. And now today it's just a shell of what it used to be, which is on the right. And why is that? We think it's because craftsmen are harder to find. And when you do find them, they're expensive or far away. And we thought that would be an interesting aspect to dive into and create something that would solve not only craftspeople's problems, but people who have an interest in crafting in these homes.
So introducing the AI Apprentice, very similar to how a craftsman would gain their knowledge from an older craftsman through an apprenticeship and become a craftsman of themselves. The craftsman, I've said craftsman every time. So the idea behind this is that those people in those traits will teach an AI software to mimic their movements and their natures of how they make things. So kind of showing the process of it. So craftsmen would teach the AI software or tech, and then that would be implemented into things such as robotics, 3D printers, and 3D softwares to create a much more efficient way of outputting these more elaborate designs, detail-oriented designs that are quickly fading away and being lost to the ease of mass production. So this is kind of how we see our future after our problem is solved, is machines working hand in hand with humans rather than just being used for assembly purposes.
And so, as he mentioned prior, we believe that our AI apprentice will help these craftspeople keep up with mass production, because that is one of the things that's taken a hit to craftspeople is mass production. People want things now in a consumer day and age. You know, we don't want to wait for things to be built. Even if it's a very unique piece, we don't feel like waiting for it to be produced. So we envision these AI apprentices helping craftspeople keep up with their tasks and having them being able to keep up with just, you know, everyday life and be able to adapt in this changing economy.
So once we've been able to recreate the new or the old in a more efficient manner, we're able to explore the new and begin developing more creative and elaborate designs that can often be forgotten due to the ease of construction with our current methods. So it just gives us more flexibility going into the future on how we build. And that was the AI purchase. Thank you.
All right. Sharks?
So if someone came to you and said, I want to invest money in this, I want to do this idea. I want to hear what your timeline would be like for the first 6 months and then year in terms of where would you invest resources to start developing this? Is it in the software? Is it in the like fabrication piece? Like where do you put your time and energy and money?
I think a good chunk of the beginning process would be software orientated, just trying to really hone in like the process of the craftsman teaching the AI software and getting that to a good enough level to proceed to the next level of then putting in robotics and such.
And I would say, too, just doing some research, more research on where specifically this might be needed right now. Obviously, in the future, we envision it as being an option that anybody can get their hands on. But, you know, right now, when you start off, like where are areas that this is most needed? You know, where are the most craftspeople concentrated? Like what kind of where those places would be located and focusing on that as well.
Can you guys help me understand where they're making the money back? Because as a craftsman who is struggling to make ends meet, they're not going to be the ones that are purchasing the AI machine.
Yeah.
So are they then
We
so what's the financial model there?
Yeah, so we saw it as like, yes, this would be a little bit more expensive up front. It kind of goes back to that saying of you have to spend money to make money. And then we saw the craftsmen being able to have these AI apprentices essentially do their work so they're not bogged down in their own work and they can go out and look for more opportunities, have more opportunities to sell their products that they are creating and more of like that opportunity cost that's behind this. That was one avenue that we thought. But yeah, that's probably the main thing that we were thinking about. It would just free up their own time, I suppose, to look for new things and maybe more people to train and stuff like that.
And then I also just have a question, because I feel like so much of the people who are deep in their craft it's about they themselves creating the crafts. Like they're not going to be the ones that want to necessarily go out and do something else.
Yes.
So just pondering how that all works into it.
Yeah, for sure. That's something that we, admittedly struggled with as well. Because, I feel like a lot of craftspeople that we've met are very proud of what they do. And it's something that they, it's like, look at what I made, essentially. But I think it goes back to, yes, like, there's nothing, like, I totally agree with that mindset. But then at the same time, we've talked previously as well that as the world changes and adapts, you kind of have to change and adapt with it as well. So we thought maybe this would be a good opportunity to kind of get their foot in the door and maybe test it out and see, machines aren't as bad, or, maybe I do need a little bit of help. Sometimes we all, myself included, need to be told, hey, like, let somebody else help you with this if you can. So.
Anthony, you want to go?
Yeah, I guess for me, I love the idea. I think actually what could be helped is if you actually flipped your thinking. Instead of being from the supply side, come from the demand side, as in from the market. I would have also started by saying that the home renovation market in the United States is $400 billion, about 40% larger than the restaurant industry. That's huge. So, and if you think about that, you have a scale. You have on one end the fine craftsman, where I'm going to hire someone for their entire life to do my Victorian's not, it's mass produced, but like, my high detail house. And on the other side, there's the IKEA. But there's a great sweet spot in the middle where actually I want some of this crafts work, but the problem is that it's very expensive. It doesn't scale. So maybe the technology can help, where you can actually learn from the craftsmen and magnify their abilities. Maybe there's room to actually not quite go into mass manufacturing, but maybe there are ways to help take that craft, but make it more accessible. Right? So you can tap into it. So I think like with small tweaks, if you think about it from the consumer side of who's going to engage this, or are you really going for that top 1%? In which case, then you might actually ask different questions, right? It's boutique. It is one craftsman, one client, and your software does something big and it's super expensive. Or maybe you move more mainstream and start tweaking this relationship between software and production and the craftsperson and their skill. And you have these trade-offs. And I think that there is a sweet spot somewhere, anywhere along that line. I think that's for you to think about of how much do you bring in the technology, because that could change the way you think about your project. But I think you've highlighted an interesting relationship that, I'm not quite sure you've landed on the right spot, or I need to hear more. But I think that there is something interesting in this relationship.
I almost think there's the collective data points of all the craftsmen that it becomes a lot more interesting than like an AI apprentice for a singular craftsman, because then it becomes like preservation of historical or like moments of time and a knowledge database rather than just like a way to manufacture craft better.
Yeah, I think if it's positioned to a craftsman that, oh, we're going to teach robots to do what you do, they're going to be like, I'm not teaching them what I do. But if you do position in a place in a way that Evelyn's talking about, that this is preserving the craft, right? As we move into an age that craft is dying, right? And there are fewer human apprentices out there that are willing to learn what they know. This may be a little bit more well received by the craftsmen when it's basically becoming a way to document what they've done and preserve it for the future, and to be able to continue that craft into the future. It may not be done by human hands in the future; it may be done by robots. But it had the genesis, the origin of those ideas, and the craft was human based, and in the future, it's being done by robot hands.
Yeah.
But and you may get more buy-in that way, and essentially you're shifting your target market from the craftsman, which is what it sounded like you presented, that the craftsman is your customer, to more like what Anthony was saying, is that it's open up that market, make it a bigger market. The mass market is your customer.
I mean, I could even think like be a smarter version of Etsy, and because Etsy is tying to individual people who do what they love. There are a lot of hobbyists, but there are people who do really beautiful things. And the beauty is that it doesn't scale to the level of like, IKEA or Walmart. But I wonder if there is, because this requires making, and my house has peculiarities. Like, if I want a stair detail, my stairs already exist. So, it can only be so big. Okay, to do one-off is hard, but maybe that is something. Maybe the AI learns that craftsman's style over time, and gives adjustments where they can make it better, faster, or the robot does it or something like that. But I think that if you think about the whole kind of process of a renovation and craft, I think you can begin to break it down more and just give it more clarity as to what your project is.
Yeah.
And shifting that market takes your original concept was an expense or an investment from a craftsman, now becomes a potential revenue source for that craftsman.
Yeah, they don't have the revenue to pay for this.
Right.
If they're a small market, the bigger market is actually the people who want to get new banisters or something.
Right, and now you can hire those craftsmen to provide that data, and now they're not only preserving it for the future, but they're getting paid to do it.
Yeah.
And I think, just to echo what I'm hearing, but I think there's an underlying ethical issue that you have to address in writing this business model. Like, how do you, how does it benefit the craftsman to give that knowledge, and how can they benefit too?
Yeah.
Okay.
This one is an interesting project to me because of all the irony that's wrapped up in it, right? But the example, and this goes to what several of you have talked about, but for weeks now I've thought, what if there were an earthquake or a tornado or something in Washington, D.C., and all the monuments were damaged, the White House was damaged, the Capitol building was damaged, all of these places. How in the world do we restore all of those buildings if there's something like that? And in the back of my mind, let's gear up the AI apprentices
and
get them
the
out
robots.
there. And, so super interesting. All right. Thanks, guys.
Yep,
Good
thank you.
presentation. And One Truck, you're up. Go ahead and get set up and we'll get started.
Plastic waste is a major issue for the world. From the 1950s to the 70s, a small amount of plastic waste was produced, so waste was manageable. By the late 90s, plastic waste had more than tripled in 2 decades. In the early 2000s, plastic waste had rose more in a single decade than it had in the previous 40 years. Today, we produce about 300 million tons of plastic waste every year. That is almost equivalent to the weight of the human population. The Great Pacific Garbage Patch covers an area twice the size of Texas, or 3 times the size of France, and contains more than 1.8 trillion pieces of plastic. These 10 rivers alone carry more than 90% of the plastic waste that end up in the ocean. These are the places that we would focus on first. Our purpose is to breathe new life into old materials by serving communities that have an excess of waste materials and a lack of building materials. The name of our company is One Truck to change the world. The idea is to create bricks from waste materials. Plastic is durable and most are resistant to degradation. They would be thinner, lighter, greater insulating against noise, and have 5 times more heat insulating properties than regular bricks. They are also cheaper and more fuel efficient to manufacture and is less energy intensive than recycling plastic into other forms. It's a simple process. There are 5 steps. You pick a location, you acquire a truck, people bring you materials that are both clean and dry, you shred the materials, and using steam, plastic is then compressed into bricks. The bricks can then snap together like Lego pieces to reduce the need for mortar. Africa's first recycled plastic classroom was built earlier this year. It was built in just 5 days. Contrast that to the months and extensive training it takes to build a classroom using traditional construction methods. It can also be constructed using only a hammer with no prior training needed and costs 40% less. Out of all the plastic waste produced, 9% has been recycled. 12% has been incinerated, which releases CO2 and increases climate change. 79% has accumulated in landfills, dumps, or the natural environment. Most plastic items never fully disappear. They just break down into smaller and smaller particles. These plastic particles can then be swallowed by farm animals or fish and can find their way into our diets. Plastic can also clog sewers and provide breeding grounds for mosquitoes, which can cause diseases such as malaria and pneumonia. While all of this information could seem hopeless, with cleaner water and cleaner air, we can make a healthier world. With One Truck, we can truly change the world.
All right. Thank you. Sharks?
I can jump in. I think that this is really interesting. And I really like your motivations. Plastic is a really big problem, that we're very aware of. For me, I wonder, so this is a different type of project than some of the other ones, but I wonder the output of whether the brick makes the most sense. Because bricks are fairly cheap. They're about 5 cents to make in the United States, let alone cheaper if you're elsewhere in the world. But I wonder, because what it makes me think of is that the problem of plastic doesn't come from places like the United States. It tends to actually be from emerging economies. Southeast Asia is big. You highlight that, China. And it's because of a lot of single-use plastics that come out there. And for me, the reason why I target the brick as my question mark is that I wonder if you can actually find another item that actually has value for those markets. And I actually don't know. Jakarta has one of the worst flooding problems in the world. The whole city is sinking. They have massive pumps that don't work. Why? Because they're literally clogged with plastic bags. This was a project that I worked on. with the Clinton Foundation. So you've highlighted a great problem. I would actually say, don't look at the giant thing in the middle of the Pacific. Go to the sources of where the plastic is coming from and see if you can intervene with a product at that point. Because if you can actually extract value in Jakarta, in I don't even know other cities, in China or something like that, whatever it is, it could be toys, it could be balloons. I have no idea. But that, I think, makes a big difference. And I think everything else you've thought of about, the process is great. Keep applying that thinking, but what is it that is interesting in Jakarta, Kuala Lumpur, Sub-Saharan Africa? Is there a need that can actually be easily produced to prevent the before picture that you have here?
So I want to go back to your 5 steps slide. Can you go backwards? So I think in your pitch, just some general feedback, like I think everybody agrees plastic is a problem, and like we get that in this presentation. But what I want to hear about as a shark is more about this process, because what you're talking about is there are a lot of steps to get from the concept to the idea that you're talking about, and then also getting it implemented in order to solve the solution. So what happens with getting people to engage with that truck? And how do you get them to actually go out and collect the plastics? That's the stuff that I want to hear about. Like, how are you manufacturing the brick part? And then where is the revenue coming in? I know I'm getting like really in the weeds on that, but like for me, like that's what's exciting, because that's where you're actually selling something. And there's like a connection back to the people who are going to do it and make it happen. So feel free to jump in if you want to respond to that, but that's just general feedback.
Well, it is a nonprofit, so you could get most of your revenue from donations or from other nonprofits. I know in a lot of there are a lot of companies that are actually working on plastic bricks. I know one of them is a Colombian company in Coach Ivory that's doing plastic bricks, and they have people bringing in plastic that they're picking there. I know, but that they get paid to do that. Like people, like for every piece of plastic that comes in, they get paid.
Right. But even, and I'm just going to jump in since we don't have a lot of time, but even with a nonprofit, like you don't need, and Tony and I have both worked for nonprofits, so we can say this from a place of confidence, but like you don't necessarily just need to generate donations from people who are financially funding your nonprofit. Like in what you're presenting, there's revenue here that would fund the nonprofit. Like how do you get money back into the community by hiring people to drive those trucks, or how much waste can they collect that would generate money? I know I'm focusing on money, but like just that's the transactional part of this, if that makes sense, in order to get the solution that you're trying to achieve. And so I think that's where you could keep digging in, and you could come up with some different ideas about how to collect more funding to support the nonprofit, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah, and I don't want to focus on revenue either, but nonprofits goes into a whole other problem with how do those nonprofits get funded, because it's not easy to get funded for a nonprofit. But that's not the question that I have. The question I have is, and I don't know the answer to this, is it that easy to just scoop up a bunch of plastic and put it into a steam machine and pop out something that's usable?
No, it has to be clean and dry, because if it's not clean, then you're going to get bacteria in it. It's going to create a whole other set of problems. And then a lot of material that's actually been like sitting in the ocean or sitting like almost breaking down, it's not viable. So it's only certain kinds of plastic that could work.
Right. So there would have to be another step in here of sorting. So you'd have location, truck, material. Then you have to sort out the plastic that's viable for the product. Okay.
Sorry, Jeff. I mean, I don't have much to add. I was just like, oh, this would be interesting if it was all in one truck. But it's obviously, you just kind of answered that it needs to be a bigger operation. Because I was going to make it like, my suggestion would be like, is there a way that you can hand over this business to an individual and create kind of a microloan system where people can then take this, create revenue from it, and then you package it all in one, and you are the purveyor of the microloans.
Yeah, that's interesting. So they like lease the truck, and the truck has everything it needs in it, and it can go out and it can generate revenue for whoever leases the truck.
Yeah.
That's an interesting idea. And you know, Tricia, the lesson here obviously is that there's opportunity here, right? There's a lot of different directions that you could take this, and just, I guess, figuring out the direction you want to dig. I don't know if that's the appropriate metaphor or not, but this is, you've got something here if you want to continue to figure out which direction to take it. There's some opportunity.
Yeah, I hope you'll see our feedback is just excitement, not anything harsh.
Yeah. All right. Very good. Thank you. Okay. Well, let's just keep going then. And so that means that ARCH, you're up. Go ahead and get set up, share your screen, and start when you're ready.
Alrighty. Well, thank you all for hanging in there. I want to start by asking a couple of questions. What are your fundamental human needs? What do you need in order to live your best life? For some people, this means their morning lattes, but for some, it means other things. Through our research, we found that many organizations coincide that in three community access gaps, that basic access gap needs, in three community access gaps to basic needs that contribute to living healthy lives. Using Indianapolis as an example, there's an estimated 200,000 Indy residents who live in food deserts. Sometimes transportation is often cited as a major barrier to healthcare access, sometimes meaning that there is an excessive distance between patient and a healthcare facility. Furthermore, here in Indianapolis, there's only 109 low-income housing complexes, leaving, as you can see on the map, some gaps. Our company sees an opportunity to use vacant and abandoned properties in cities, towns, and small rural communities in the Midwest, where the current inventory of vacant properties can be reused or transformed to close these community access gaps. Research suggests that the vacant and abandoned properties disturb communities' economy, health, welfare, safety, and environment. Our purpose is to reuse these buildings and transform them into assets to create community value.
Our firm has a four-step approach for reusing or transforming vacant abandoned buildings. Basically, it is diagnose, plan, implement, and evaluate. At the first step, we collect all relevant data through the structural contextual analysis and feasibility studies. And the second step is understanding the potential and the needs of the community and creating a concept. Third step is developing construction management strategies. And finally, providing resource for continuous success. The transformation and reuse of a building aims to stabilize, revitalize, stimulate economic recovery, improve quality of life for residents, and shrink community-based need gaps.
We actually changed our name to Occupied by Design. We hope that to be the leading consultant in transforming abandoned buildings into accessible food markets, affordable housing, and accessible healthcare facilities.
All right, very good. I'm sorry I missed the the name change there. Apologize for that.
So my biggest question is, who is paying you guys for your work and for the transformation of the building?
Basically, we categorize our clients into parts: economically distressed clients and economically stable clients. So building owners, non-profit organizations, and community groups, as well as private community developers, building owners, and community entrepreneurs.
And for our economically distressed clients means that they might not have the funding to renovate or transform their buildings. So I think a branch of our company would focus on creating or helping them get that funding so that they can use it to transform the building.
And what would be the incentive of the economically stable clients? Would they own those buildings then?
They can own the buildings, or they can lease them. But we are focusing, and clients are going to stay in these communities and who can, because vacant buildings may have a spillover effect, right, in other areas in the community. So we hope that the economic incentive, it also of this client, it's focused in maybe another business sector that they have in the area.
I think similar to Trisha's presentation, you guys are having the same idea. Like there's a social justice issue here, like at the root of the problem that you're trying to solve. And there's a general understanding, especially with this group, that is an issue. We want to serve, we want to improve distressed areas economically by supporting them with housing and food and access to health services. What's not clear is really what the root of the business model is. Like, so to Evelyn's point, like if you're a consulting firm, can you guys give us a little bit more specific about it, the what you would go in and do? Like when you go in, like is it that you're identifying the property, or you're going in, or is that property already identified and then you go in and do an evaluation? Like it's not exactly clear to me where the service is.
Right. Well, I think our service follows in all those four approaches that we are anticipating. For the first one, for the first kind of service or the first tier, it's helping understand the data. The data is already there. Like we know which ones are the vacant or abandoned buildings. So we would focus on seeing what structure in this community would work best for the transformation, either to become a food market or a healthcare facility, sorry, I'm blanking. Healthcare facility, food market, or Jesus, I cannot remember my own thing.
Affordable housing.
Affordable housing. Thank you. And then and another kind of step to, we see it, the first step as maybe stopping there if the client it's all what it needs, but to make it to the homegrown or entire a fully processed project, the second one would be creating those scenario data that each or that says this type of a building or this typology of a building can generate this economic and revenue and such, and more information in that regard. Then we can move, if they accept that, I think we can move into the develop a construction sets, construction drawings, making sure that the goals of the projects are just kind of like, this is kind of like the typical
so I'm gonna interrupt you. So it's like sounds like you're like developer forecasters, and then once you like lock in a client, you're like, yeah, and then we're gonna be your architect too.
Right.
Okay.
That I think for me is actually part of the challenge, because I think, you know, if we think about why a space is vacant, it's not because someone doesn't know what could go in. You know, a developer and a landowner knows what could go in. They're just choosing not to usually. So I think that actually, and to kind of Evelyn's precedent, looking at kind of the REIT side, the real estate investment side, I think that you could actually begin to look at it more fundamentally of like, and I think the core question is, why is it vacant? It could be anything, but there's a reason why it's vacant. And can you change that process? And the reason why it's vacant isn't because of construction drawings. It's a fundamental fiscal issue that could be iterated upon. And I think if you actually just isolate just that first step in your process and actually really interrogate that, I think you could actually make a lot of change, particularly since I think you're identifying some of these community needs. Like, why is there not a medical center or a pharmacy? That would automatically bring some revenue potentially. But maybe the landowner wants more, right? So that delta between what someone can pay and what they want to make is one of those challenges. And how you begin to close that and that process with the creativity that you're thinking, or maybe you find process innovations that actually reduces the cost so that actually what they can make is a little bit higher, so that delta is smaller, you know, makes it more feasible. So I think if you just focus on that one section with your kind of social justice, spatial justice thinking, I think you can actually find a lot of space for real innovation, whether it's a financial mechanism, a process mechanism, a pop-up thing where maybe it's actually a quick way to retrofit. It might not be perfect, but it's good enough to get a community health center in, up to code really fast. You know, I think that's where, you know, if you play with those numbers, the costs and the potential revenue side, I think you could begin to do a lot just at that one space.
Yeah, and I think that was kind of like our struggle. I mean, we wanted to do allied with this project, and yeah.
I think if you just focus on diagnose and what you do with diagnose, that process innovation, because I think you're right. You've highlighted this. I think you're biting off too much. Focus on this, and I think you've got something there potentially.
Thank you.
And you
yeah,
could,
that and the revenue stream in particular, just because because technically people already do this for developers, and developers are building in the areas that they want to develop because of all the reasons that Tony and Anthony and Janine alluded to. So changing the financial model and the structure. So we have been dropping in some things in the Zoom chat. So just check some of those things out.
Yes, Spacious was looking at the exact same issue that you were. They actually then kind of became a pseudo landlord on behalf of the developer as a way to do this. You know, they actually had to intervene. They became the party that became, in a way, the owner, and they absorbed the risk, which then came with the reward because they absorbed the risk from the landlord or from the owner. And as a result, they could move into this kind of like creative space with like artists and everything because they absorbed the risk and thought of a different revenue model that a traditional landowner does not want to do. It's just too much for them to deal with. That's why I think in this slide alone, there's a lot that you begin to think about.
Right, if you look at the way things are being done now in places like Detroit, or the way that Harlem was redeveloped in New York City, a lot of those are public-private coalitions that come together in order to not only bring in the economic requirements, but it also brings in the incentives, tax incentives, in order to spur development, to give developers the incentive to fill those buildings with things. And then once a bunch of those buildings start being developed, then the economy shifts in that region. And so you may want to do a little bit of research on some of those areas that were once big vacant areas that are now thriving, and find out how that happened and why that happened, and then pick that one of these pieces that you've developed here and focus on that piece so you can become that cog within the bigger system.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So I think this is another another example. This is an exciting project, and we've talked about this through the semester, right? Focusing on the one thing. So this is a great example for everybody when we're especially when we're getting ready to start something, right? What is the one thing? What's the minimal viable product? Where does our pinpoint focus need to be? And I know it's hard, right? It's hard. We want to do a lot of things. We want to pack a lot of things in here. But let's accomplish the one thing and then see if we can expand from there. Good project. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. Stasis. And while Nicola is setting up, as Anthony and others mentioned, there is information in the chat box links and things that people have been dropping in there. I will save the chat and I will send everything in the chat to all of you in a message so that you can have those resources available after we're done here.
Okay, so imagine you're the owner of an aging building and you want to lease it out, but you're having trouble finding viable tenants with the building's current condition. You need to make a change and upgrade your building, but how can you make your property the most profitable and attract quality tenants? Studies have shown that projects such as deep energy retrofits increase property value and potential rental income. But what is a deep energy retrofit? It's an extensive renovation that takes each building component into consideration for energy savings and sustainability, including lighting, heating and cooling systems, the building envelope, and passive design. Enter the Stasis dashboard. Stasis will analyze your building for peak performance while you sit back and watch your building's profitability grow. The Stasis dashboard will be with you through 3 stages of your deep energy retrofit: analyze, strategize, and implement. During the analyze phase, the Stasis dashboard will show current energy performance, operating costs, and profitability, while also comparing metrics for your business sector, either commercial, residential, or industrial. In the strategize phase, this dashboard will show proposed energy solutions along with operational cost savings and potential for increased rental profit. In the implement stage, the dashboard will continue to monitor performance during and after your retrofit, ensuring your project lives up to its peak potential. Analyze and strategize can be accomplished in as few as 60 days, at least 30 for monitoring while concurrently introducing energy models. The implement timeline will vary based on your project scope and size, as it includes architectural design and construction. Implement can also be instituted as a service for the life of your building. Are you on a limited timeline and budget? Stasis will help you break your retrofit down into manageable phases while maintaining optimal performance and profitability. Do you own multiple buildings? The Stasis dashboard is scalable to your project needs, whether across the country or even globally. The Stasis dashboard will be with you every step of the way, helping you make the best decisions for your investment, helping you find your equilibrium. Thank you.
All right. Very good. Sharks?
So I think yours is a really interesting one. So let me actually break the script and talk about, if you were to take this forward, strategies to do this. And I'm going to pretend you're going to take it forward and you're actually going to build this, because yours is a good lesson in kind of the development process of startups. I would say continue to develop this and get as much money as you can from like on-campus sources. Because I think the challenge here is that it's a really great idea, but the delta is that it's hard to critique without actually seeing a real thing working, right? Like, because it's a dashboard, like we visually see it. And you're not going to develop that in a semester when you're concentrating on other things. So I recognize that. But I think that the difficulty is that I believe everything you're saying. We know that energy is a big problem, but it's hard to critique without seeing like the minimal viable product and seeing it work in some way or to actually say, in this thing, this is how much money it would save. Look at this building that was just done on campus. It was just retrofitted. If they had used the system, they would have saved 20% and actually had improved, energy, something, in kind of a real sense. Like to actually use a real building using your models to say this is the real impact. Because it's like it's so close, and as a result, because we can see it actually potentially working, I'm much more critical of it, right? Just by the nature of it, there's less hand waving that you can do. And I think for me, that's the challenge, and that's why I say if you do want to take this forward, get free money on campus where they're willing to be, give you the startup funds to actually do kind of a real dashboard and to understand what goes on in each of these boxes. What are the formulas? What are the algorithms? How do you get the inputs? What does the data look like? Is it a CSV interface? Is it tied to sensors? Is it pulling aggregated data from central energy plants? Is it just I take a LiDAR and scan the building and it knows everything because its AI is so smart, right? That's kind of the missing part for me.
Yeah, actually, I don't have a slide for that, but I am looking at, initially it would be taking the existing building and using sensors for data for that building, but also pulling existing data on, say like a commercial building built within a certain time frame. Data it's out there. There's Johnson Controls has the sensors, and they have kind of a dashboard. It's just it's for people that want to manage their own building. It's geared towards toward the management company or the management part of that company. So I was like, well, maybe I can pair with Johnson Controls and kind of take on the management part of that, and just provide this dashboard using their sensors or other sensors. Like I wanted to include lighting and that kind of thing, or like daylighting and such, but initially definitely just focus on the energy use and performance.
This is a crowded market because it's a huge market potential, particularly because so many buildings in the United States need to be retrofitted. So that's why there's a lot of entrants. And I think being very clear about your unique ad, like I think by saying I could work with Johnson Controls, there's nothing defensible. Johnson Controls could just do it, right? So not to discourage, but I think it's actually think about some of the innovations that you're thinking about that's actually in this. I actually see a lot of potential, intellectual property that you're creating through algorithms, through ways of combining data fusion, intelligence factors. Like there's a lot, if you actually tease this one image apart, that actually could be defensible. It's just you have to develop it, or you have to have some rigor that makes me believe that you can do it, type of thing. And you're just early in the stage, but I think you could do it. I'd encourage you to actually think about that.
Thank you.
Do you imagine, Nicola, that this data that you collect from each individual building, that it links to a broader network?
Yes, definitely. Definitely, as a larger database, as more clients kind of come on board, it can be provided to the architecture firm that would be designing for the retrofit. I don't see this company, the Stasis, as doing the design work for that, rather kind of, as Jeff put it once, being like a doctor to diagnose the problem and then write a prescription for the deep energy retrofit, and then referring to like a specialist. So I see a client, in addition to the building owner, clients wanting the data being architect or architects, engineers, and those kind of firms.
Yeah. Great.
I think this would be a good one when you pitch it to tie to like a case study example of like thinking about a specific market. Like for me, the immediate thing that comes up is like, a multifamily apartment unit where there's a management team that's trying to maximize profits, and they're looking at a lot of units, and they have a long-term investment in it. I think, I don't know, for me, I think that would help me to Anthony's point, to think through the like operational side of how the dashboard actually functions, because basically what you'll also have to do is work with all these utility companies to get data, which I know if you're studying this stuff, you probably know it's a tough that's a tough group to just get data from, freely and accurately, unless you're on the like owner side. You can potentially get that information for different specific projects, but to aggregate it and to look at so many different types of utilities that would be impacting the building. And then also like there's specific things for each building, like the skin and like the transfer between interior and exterior elements. Like, I don't know, I guess I'm just thinking like it feels like a lot to bite off. I like the dashboard idea, but like in terms of actually like doing that analysis through a scan, I don't know. I just like it's got my imagination going on, like how would that be feasible to condense down into such a succinct technology.
So one of the biggest like if you talk to even a lot of the COAT award winners who design these really sustainable platinum buildings, like one of the biggest reasons why their buildings don't actually deliver is because of user behavior, right? Like if you are meant to have access to daylighting, but I am going to be on the computer all day and the sun causes glare and I'm going to have the shades down all day, then like even if you made the building changes, user behavior is not going to allow the building to perform at the maximal function. And this is a really crowded space. Where I see less people actually trying to create change is in the change management of the user behavior, and can you gamify their experience in a way that they're actually using the building in a way that's meant to be used most efficiently after it's been constructed and retrofitted. But I don't know, that probably is a whole nother spin off of.
Yeah, well, no, that's very interesting. I actually wrote down when you mentioned the like kind of the gamify for tracking where people are in a location in the office, when you mentioned that earlier today, and kind of popping up questions. And then I did look into possible like post-occupancy evaluations. So if there are occupants, if it's an office or something like that, if there could be surveys done beforehand, if maybe it's owner occupied or something like that, surveys that can be done beforehand, or aggregate data for general user types that can be tied into both the before data and after data. But that is a whole other level.
I wish I had one of my building scientist friends on the call to give you feedback, because I feel like I'm not able to fully articulate what I was thinking. But I know that like I think it's a good direction that you're thinking about this, and like trying to figure out how to consolidate it is exciting, and I think that it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, very good. Again, a lot of possibilities here, and I will remember, I don't, do you know Dan Overby, Professor Overby at Ball State? So I don't know if you talked to him about this before, but he would be intensely interested in what you're talking about here.
No, not yet. I had a sustainability course with him, and then he'll be teaching studio next semester. So yeah, it'll be cool.
Good. Very good. Okay. Good project. Thank you. Catalyst development. You're up.
All right. Hello, my name is Darwin Navarro.
Oh,
all
right. I'm Kyle Drenth.
And we are Catalyst Development.
Ah, man. There we go.
Imagine, if you will, Columbus, Indiana, home of international company Cummins Engine Co. Much of Columbus's success and identity has been attributed to the presence of Cummins. But what would happen if this corporate entity decided to move? Would it be the same town? Would it still thrive? Next slide. If we compare this to cities like Gary, Indiana, a once thriving city based around the steel industry, the biggest issue is when corporate entities decide to leave, the community is left in a domino effect, leading it down a downward spiral with limited opportunities and amenities. The common trend in post-industrial Rust Belt communities is there's an imbalance of corporate dominance versus a diverse local market. Towns and communities developed around trend-setting corporate dominance versus local markets creates unstable local economies in the long run.
So what are we trying to solve? We're trying to address the lack of market diversity, lack of essential amenities, lack of job opportunities, and property underutilization in these areas. So who do we serve? We serve local organizations, city planners, local businesses, and investors. And our focus is these post-industrial towns.
So what's at stake? The destructive cycle of corporate dependency, which causes minimal job variety, harmful consolidation of local green market, reliance on corporate monopolies for goods and services, gentrification by undesired and unethical development, rather than sustainable, locally owned businesses.
So what makes us different? Consider the average Joe Schmo development group. What they're doing is they're buying cheap land and they're trying to get a lot of high profit yield out of it. And they're determining their uses based on trend-based occupancies. And they're also gentrifying the area out with the old and with the new. In contrast, Catalyst Development wants to guide neighbors towards revitalization through underutilized properties. And we want to examine community needs through surveying and town hall meetings. And then we also want to pay homage to the roots of those areas and honor and highlight their historical past. So what's our solution? We're trying to bring design that empowers sustainable communal revitalization brought by a synthesis of data and understanding of local needs.
So if we kind of flip the narrative from earlier, if we place a greater emphasis on a diversity of local businesses rather than corporate dominance, we can create sustainable local economies.
So how does this work? We have a 3-step process of learning, which involves hearing the needs of our communities that we're working in and understanding their needs from the root of the problem. And then we're taking our analysis from what we discussed with these members of the community and synthesizing them into possible solutions that are catered exactly to their specific needs in their areas. And then we're applying these synthesized ideas through developmental suggestions and presentations to the community. And we're trying to incite a movement of startups and entrepreneurial activity within the area and catalyzing a movement. So what will life be like afterwards? Communities will have access to a diverse assortment of locally run amenities and opportunities through a neighborly approach to development. Questions?
All right. Sharks?
How's it paid for?
I was going to say, walk me through the financial model.
Sure. So we are thinking that we can't really start developing right off the bat. We will need to have a series of consulting work before we start actually fronting the money for some of these projects.
Really the biggest thing on that, kind of tapped into that as well. So the way that our process would actually work is we would have the first step would definitely be more of a consultation and research development phase in which we do an analysis based off of what these communities actually need. So maybe it might be a city planner or a local organization that reaches out asking for assistance on what they can do with the land or like what opportunities they can provide for their local communities. So it might end up just being a consultation as a first phase. And if we receive enough interest and if we get funding through grants and other sources, then it becomes we end up going to the second phase of the process, which ends up being more of the development phase. So I guess what makes us different is there's a greater emphasis on a consultation and understanding what actually needs to be built for a sustainable community rather than just going in and coming up with an idea that may or may not actually benefit the community at large.
I guess I'm still struggling because what I'm hearing is that you don't have a way to pay for it. And I don't know who you're billing. So I'm not like, I know that's kind of generalizing, but I guess I'm just struggling with like, who's going to pay for the R&D?
Yeah, I mean, we would be mostly trying to get some consulting work out of like the city planners that may see a problem within the community, and then they would bring us in to investigate it further.
And do you see, like, in terms of the structure of the business, like, do you see it acting like a consulting firm, or like, is it like a traditional architecture firm? What's the model of the business?
So it'd definitely be primarily a consulting firm, which would be doing more research-based projects to kind of analyze and synthesize what actually would need to be built for sustainable communities. And then I guess the second part, because it'd be more of a, I guess more of like a planning and development company rather than like a traditional like architecture firm. So we'd be looking at like the broader picture, in which we'd be looking at the needs of a community. We'd try to figure out what businesses are actually there, what natural resources or opportunities could thrive in those communities, and then we'd kind of proceed after we actually get some of that knowledge.
To me, it sounds like an urban planning model, like an urban planning firm, or like city planners almost in a way, but also with this like local social justice component, you know, and then you can kind of grow from there. But like, it sounds like a studio environment, because a lot of times urban planners and urban designers are looking at a lot of these issues in terms of when they go after city development. It's been a long time since I've worked with them, so I've lost my vocabulary around this, but it is something that they do when they go after city bids and try to serve that community.
I think a practical application of this would be, and this has actually happened in our neighborhood right here, a consultant comes in, or a development company like this comes in. They connect with the CDC, the local community organization, who somehow comes up with some grant money to fund their study. They've identified a property, you know, that fits this model that we're talking about, and then it's designed and it's redeveloped, I guess would be the proper approach for the communities that you're talking about here. And a lot of those end up being the tax credit type projects. So the funding mechanism becomes the tax credit approach to it. So I think that's one model, but it's there's probably others out there, I guess.
I'm going to just say, like, in this domain, like partially to your point, Jeff, what a developer worries about day in, day out is managing financial risk. So if they're opening a new business and, you know, whatever, small restaurant, community wants restaurants. The developer will do pro formas, look at it, and it's just like, is there enough demand to support it? And if it's a no, you know, then they're not going to do it. Then they can manage the risk if the community's saying, or if the town or whatever is like, well, we'll, you know, do tax abatements, or we will give you grants. That is to just help them buffer risk. So I think, like, here on one end, it could be a planning opportunity of better surveys to see what the community wants. But if the money's not there, if it can't be supported, if the risk is too high, nothing's going to get done. So I think for you to think about, especially in these post-industrial towns, maybe there is a way to look at what are all the grants out there, what are all the tax incentives that could happen. Is there community support, community organizations that could jump in, which was a big thing that saved Detroit. A lot of foundations actually came in to help developers say, okay, it's worth it to actually put my money up because I know I have cover, you know, if something goes wrong, because it's a huge risk. So I think if you begin to think about that, and how do you make a convincing case to someone who's going to pony up $5 million for a storefront, you know, for just a storefront, that's a lot of money that they might be putting up. That's a lot of people who might lose their jobs. You know, if you think about it that way, and then working with this ecosystem that you've highlighted in this slide, to be able to help that, I think you could actually do a lot of good. And that could be done through AI, that could be through data things. Envelope, which came out of Shop, that's what they do. They do it with data to help mitigate risk for a developer, to see what the maximal buildable unit is that they can for a parcel in New York. So I think if you begin to play with these different parts of the equation, I think you can actually land somewhere really engaging.
So I think we've had kind of several presentations in this space, and I would encourage, I know there's a lot of architects out there that are they want to be architect as developer. These are the consulting services that I want to provide, but really explore what is the role, what is the role of city planner, and how much of what you are looking to do is part of already what they do in their day-to-day job description. Because I think you'll find that you've already eroded some of what you're putting out there because they in fact do this, and the reason why they can't implement it is because of all the things that Anthony has laid out. So that would just be a general comment to the class. I think architects are looking to create partnerships more going forward, but in doing so, we really need to understand the roles of those potential partners, so we can maximize the value that we bring to the conversation when talking to them.
Everyone here needs to sit down with a city planner, a community development person, a housing advocacy group, and a real estate firm, and actually see what they do. Because I think that there is a lot of overlap with these domains. And I think actually by sitting down and seeing these pain points actually can help bring a lot of innovation to the space.
And a for-profit developer.
Yes, yeah.
Because I think a lot of what we're talking about here, it comes down to the money. If the money's there, you can make these things happen. And if the money's not there, it doesn't happen.
But it can also be built in incentives. And this is something, that I just learned recently, right? Because so I worked with organizations like when people were doing the bid for Amazon HQ2, it was really all about the incentives that they could provide not only Amazon, the company, but each of the employees, should they have that should a new HQ2 be built in the town.
So if your goal is to try to revitalize some of these post-industrial towns and cities, if you can come up with a model that is financially viable, you'll be very successful. You'll be very successful in achieving that goal, and you'll be very successful financially, because that's the bottom line. Is if you can come into these towns and cities and show them that this can be done financially and it can be sustained, which is just as important, because they can make make all the changes they want, but if it can't be sustained long term financially, it will end up in the same place down the line, because it all comes down to the economics of those towns. Those towns thrived early on because of those big corporate entities that fed those and built those towns and cities, and when they left, they died. And so you need to create that new source of income and new source of revenue to replace that. And I know that was your concept, but I'm not sure you achieved that with what you presented. But if you do come up with that solution, that's something that is desperately needed in many cities and towns throughout the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, another facet of our idea was there's a architecture firm in Ann Arbor, Michigan named Synecdoche, and what they do is they do a similar partnership with entrepreneurs. They front the money for all their startup costs, and they accept like a lower fee, I guess, but then they have dividends throughout their career with their new startup. So then they're constantly getting funds from that business that's thriving that they help start. So maybe we can implement something similar so that we have continual income through one project that we've done.
Yeah, I think that would be good. I mean, I like the aspirational part of it. Like, you want to make a really big impact on cities that need it. So like your application of your design skills is in the right venue. It's just getting more specific about the details. And I think one little specific piece like that could really help ground this.
Yeah.
Those are all good points, and it's a very good lesson for everybody, right? And again, Anthony said this a couple of times, and this is the reality that I haven't talked about really at all this semester, but I understand that this is like a 3 credit hour class in the midst of all the other stuff that you have going on. So a lot of these things we're just scratching the surface on, right? And so the lesson for catalyst development is probably look at risk, look at financial models, things like that. That's going to be the case for almost all of these projects, one or the other, or both of those two things, because we haven't really dug too deep into financial models of any of these. Now, I guess it was Monday, actually, Anthony and I were talking, and I ran into this earlier today as well. And we heard about this from Matthew Smith from Mass Design Group about the culture of risk aversion and what risk has done to the profession of architecture, or risk aversion has done to the profession of architecture, what it means for all types of businesses, whether you're an architecture firm, you're a developer, you're a software company, whatever it is. That's something that you've got to weigh. What are you willing to risk versus what's the payoff on the other side? One of the conversations I was having with an architect earlier today was she is willing to live lean, budget lean, save when she can, take lower fees on a lot of projects, and specifically with certain clients, in order to bridge the gap, because she knows she's got these clients that she's doing high level work for, and she gets a big payoff at the end when they close on the property, they close on their loan, et cetera. So what she's doing is she is accepting risk, that financial risk. She's figured out how to live her life and run her business and her home and everything else based on this, a pretty low income, in order to give herself the freedom to accept that risk and take the larger payoff on the other side. And that's, to me, that's sort of a microcosm of everything. Like, what are you willing to do in order to bridge the gap to get to the bigger payoff? If the answer is nothing, and I want all of this to be status quo, then nothing changes, right? So I think there's a lot of lessons wrapped up in that, in this conversation. But thank you for this. Good project, and thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So we're down to one. We're down to Mentor You.
Yes,
so
sir.
Go ahead and get set up and ready, and you can get started when you're good to go.
Everybody good? Yeah. All right. So $300,000, good amount of money. I personally wouldn't mind having that right now. So $300,000 is what your firm would spend if you employed around 300 people. You needed to hire 60 people to fill back the workforce for the people that left, while also maintaining your growth objectives. And your hiring cost is about $5,000 per hire. $150,000, while still a good amount of money, is significantly less than the aforementioned $300,000. And this is what your firm would spend if you still employed those same 300 people, but this time around you only needed to hire 30 people to retain the people that left, while also maintaining your growth objectives. And once again, your hiring costs are still about $5,000 per hire. These savings can be made through employee retention. To recap, Company A has to hire 60 people due to an average 10% turnover rate, while also wanting to sustain their growth objectives. While Company B, with a better employee retention rate, has to only hire 30 people due to retaining 50% of the people who typically leave which therefore lowers what you need to hire to grow. This is especially important within the AEC industry. As you can see, the average tenure of an employee is just barely over 5 years. So my solution to the employee retention issue is Mentor You. Mentor You is a web-based mentorship program that will offer various different services such as a live dashboard, a mentor and mentee smart matching algorithm, performance tracking for primarily the HR professionals that will be using the app, and then also a learning content library that is specific to the company that is using Mentor You. Like I mentioned earlier, we would be primarily focusing within the AEC industry for a few different reasons. One, that the licensure track is a very linear process in our industry for architects and engineers, and that this mentorship program could pair with that very, very well. Another one is that internships are very prevalent within many firms. And so trying to keep interns at your actual firm rather than having them leave once they graduate would be very beneficial to them. And then also there is some other competition of mentorship-based platforms, but none are very specific to any industry. They just get anyone they try to get. I picture all employees within the firm can actually participate in this program, as mentorship is never stopped in your career. And so I can see it from the emerging professional working their way up through licensure, like I mentioned before, all the way up to management training and mentorship from a partner trying to become an owner. This is an example of how I picture the dashboard looking as if you were the HR professional using it. As you can see, we'll take example like Lisanne Viscal is the Chief Operating Officer. She doesn't currently have a mentor, but she has 2 mentees under her. And then you go down here to Ota Ken, which is a product manager. She does have a mentor with 2 mentees below her. This is just one of the features, the employee tracking and matching feature that we would offer. What we would need to move forward, we would need assistance in developing the actual software and dashboard, and in turn, a financial investment to fund that software development. And I would also love to bring in a mentorship consultant to build the best mentorship program we can, because if that isn't up to par with the software, then the whole thing doesn't really work. And that is Mentor You. Thank you.
Jordan, thanks so much. This is a great presentation and a great concept. First of all, I'm really excited to see numbers and that you're thinking about like the financial involvement of like turnover and what that costs firms and how expensive it is to replace talent. So that's great to start your presentation and to set up the problem. And then of course, I feel like you've definitely been listening to our show, because like I feel really
maybe a little.
Evelyn like has been laughing that this is like my sweet spot. So anyway, I'm just really excited because it is a huge problem and there's a complete lack of I don't know. It's like I feel like firms just don't have the time to invest in this. So having a dashboard or a model that assists is really helpful in terms of just having it managed somewhere, so when it's not top of mind, it's happening in the background.
Yeah.
So good job. I won't start with any feedback other than that. I'll let the others jump in.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Jordan, other than the matching and tracking of who is a mentee and who is a mentor, how does the rest of it work? Like the content library and the rest of the app work?
So I picture it working as, it will offer various different services more than just the matching of a mentor and a mentee. And so how I picture, for example, the learning content library. So when I came into a firm, I was onboarded with a lot of information in particular about that firm. And so if we could have all that information on this actual platform and it's company specific to them, then I think that would be strong for them. And they could also put up like Revit lessons. I don't look at this being competition to like Linda Learning. I'll never beat them out. I want mine to be very, very company specific to benefit their employees.
I have two thoughts. The first thought is, like, why just stop with the AEC industries? That's what, a whole industry, $250,000, 10% adoption, the numbers get pretty small versus, I think this slide, the way that you can customize and actually build some of the intelligence of how do you make, your platform specific, but also scalable. So maybe there's something that you really do look at the professional industries, because law has a very similar model, or, medicine. So maybe there are aspects that could be adapted for multiple to just grow kind of your population potentially, because really you can only get $2 a user per month or something like that. So
yeah,
if you think about scale, maybe there is something about the professional side and not just like every employee ever. And that might be a way to find a middle ground to scale. But I think the other side too is you're getting very specific, which I really like. I would actually love to see you develop this in kind of rapid prototyping, like paper prototyping, to show what does a mentee see. Actually, three things: what the mentee sees, what a mentor sees, and what the HR person sees. Let's sketch it out. Like literally do it with like 8.5 by 11s, draw a window, and you have Post-it notes that change to work through what the interface is and how do they connect. And that's a great way to just quickly iterate through some of your thinking, especially if you do engage with what is your third point on your kind of want slide. I think it was a consultant or something like that. I think you could already begin to iterate through some of the tool sets you're going to add by thinking about these three user sides. I think that this is something that you could actually pitch to an entrepreneurship competition on campus. Like, I think you've identified the need. I think you have the numbers. I think you've shown it. I think with a little bit more kind of prototyping to say, I've already thought about some of these aspects and I've talked to some users and this is what their feedback is. I think this is something that should absolutely be pitched with just a little bit more work.
I agree. I like that also you showed like what the interface might look like. That was a really good.
Yeah.
That really hooked me actually more than anything, that just being able to see that you would have the user login and you could match and you could have, KPIs and metrics and things that help people track goals.
For me, like from the HR side as a manager, I'm the one who's defining the KPIs. So you showed that one slide, which made me think I want to see the HR manager side. As a mentee, what do I see? Do I see pretty pictures? Do I see a happy face when I'm doing well? And then the mentor as a way of helping that process. Do I get a sad face? It's like, I really need to pay attention to Jordan, or I need to pay attention to Mark. I haven't talked to them in a little bit. It gives me a reminder. I think these are the things that you begin to design, because I think you're narrow enough where now you can get into some of the details. Even in a naive first pass designery type of way, you could already become critical through these decisions that you make.
Thank you.
So there's definitely other competitors in this space. So Lattice is one, BetterWorks, Ally.io. I think what they're doing is they're tying it back to business performance too from the individual. Which is a reason why a company would ultimately want to hop on board on this, especially an architecture firm, because I think if you can tie it back to business performance as just opposed to providing less turnover. I was kind of laughing, laughing on the inside about your 5-year term. Engineers in Silicon Valley turn over 1.7 years. On average. So
I'll also say
5 years is like
you're going to do it, because that's also how our generation is going to make more money. Like statistically where you will get a salary bump is by switching firms. So that's also working against you.
And unfortunately for the 30-person firm owner, that's the nightmare scenario, the 1.7 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. So to me though, and what I haven't seen, and what Teal is trying to do, Teal HQ by David Fano is trying to do, is put the control back into the individual's hands. So they're really looking at, me as a candidate job hunting, how do I how do I find my best career path forward? I would much rather have a mentor, and I've learned a lot more from mentors that are outside of my firm than I have ever learned from mentors inside my firm. So I think there's also interesting opportunities for a broader pollination of where you find your mentor.
So basically like a broader mentor network, essentially, what you're kind of thinking.
Yeah, so maybe the incentive for a mentor to be a part of that network is that you're more likely to get high quality candidates, and then maybe the incentive, and it might be a free job board to post to, and then the incentive for the individual to join is that you have a mentor that you feel maybe more safe talking to because it's outside of your firm, and you can really work through problems that you just can't work. You're never going to talk to your boss or your boss's peer directly about.
Okay,
Yeah.
that makes sense.
But I think this is one of those things, Evelyn, and I kind of see differently, but I get what she's saying, but at the same time, I still think it's like for perceived value for a firm owner, I see value in this. And you have to remember, not every architecture firm has a HR department. So a tool like this makes it accessible for them to incorporate these things more easily, even though, to Evelyn's point, perhaps the value is more for the individual if you're broadening your market with users that are not just in one firm.
This is why actually I think, if you did, and I think because yours is narrow, this is why I keep belaboring it. Some of you also have this, where you're at the point where you could actually take this forward. The more people you talk to, the more ideas you have. But I think for you to get your own mentors, the development of this, entrepreneurship mentors, sector focused mentors can tell you a lot more about the specifics. That's why I think actually going to people who are in the HR world, people who are looking for mentors, there's even mentoring companies out there that literally they just match you up with another professional of the city and you just meet up for lunch. Yeah. That's it. You figure it out. I mean, that's what I do in New York, and it's really helpful in the before days. So I think for you to also navigate that, and for everyone, find allies to help you make these decisions, because as the entrepreneur, you are the one who's making the decisions about the best strategic direction forward. So we're just throwing ideas at you. Teal is actually a great model on one end. I was thinking about that too. And then some firms build their own boutique. How do you fight against that? Maybe there are things that you can learn from those. Like Gensler has their own platform. Mm-hmm. So I think how you begin to look at all of the differences to find a strategic direction for you to actually have a niche in the market. Right? You can't be a duplicate of anything that's out there in the market. You have found a pain point that you alone solve, whatever that is. And the market could be big or small. It could be AEC. It could just be architecture firms. It could be fighting with Teal, directly.
All right. Any other thoughts on Mentor You from Sharks?
Good job. I think there's a lot of potential.
Yeah. Thank you. Appreciate it.
And to be fair to Jordan, in his early conversations, early in the project, he talked about mentors and mentees not in the same firm as a possibility. So.
And you told him the focus.
I don't know if I did.
Honestly, I think there's value in either option. It's just which direction do you want to go?
Yeah, exactly. There are different models.
And validate your market. This is actually a tip for everyone here. Yep. I told you in my lecture, one of the things you could do is just pick up the phone, start emailing people to validate your market. Don't make assumptions about what's out there. I think all of you still can do that and actually see what is the competitive landscape, who's fighting against you, and why are people using them or not using them, and what do they actually think? Especially in a university setting, people will pick up the phone for you. People will reply to your emails. When you lose the .edu, people stop replying. So this is a great time if you want to be an entrepreneur to reach out, get the information and understand your market.
I'm going to use that as a jumping off point to kind of get to closing discussion or whatever as well. That's an excellent point, with the .edu and what we're talking about here with your entrepreneurial type projects. But it's not just for these projects. It's not just for university oriented things. This is my advice to any architect or business person on the planet right now. One of the biggest risks that I see in any type of business is making an assumption right now. You think about what has happened in 2020, just in the United States, all the way around the world. It doesn't matter. I mean, the amount of upheaval, with pandemics, social unrest, political this, that, and the other, everything in some way has changed for everyone this year. And the biggest mistake you could possibly make is assuming that you know what that change is and assuming that you understand. The much better course is, whether it's asking HR directors what value you see in a certain type of mentorship platform, or if you're working for an architecture firm and trying to figure out where the next project is coming from, talking to clients, past clients, current clients, potential clients, and figure out what's changing, what their projection for, I say this all the time in the architecture environment that I get to play in. I think we're looking at 30 days right now. 5-year, 10-year plans, those are fantastic. But right now, I mean, I think realistically speaking that we really have to focus on 30-day projections. We have to look at 30-day plans, which means that we can't assume anything. We've got to, I think this is the ultimate lesson to come out of 2020 is assume nothing and ask as many questions as you possibly can and listen. And so with that, first of all, congratulations, you all survived. You did a fantastic job. Again, I know that this is way outside the box for a lot of you, and that's fine. I said this at the very beginning. You may never want to think about this again. Some of you may want to continue thinking about this, depending on where your passion lay. You may want to, whether it's a side hustle or something you really jump into, whatever. I'll encourage you to do that. And if you need any help with any of that, just let me know, and we'll figure out how to move it forward. Great presentations tonight. I appreciate everything that you have all put into this. Sharks, overall,
I have some closing thoughts.
Yeah.
So, and I just did a round of interviews for one of our buildings where a lot of architects came in and interviewed. So just any presentation, whether on Zoom or anywhere else, I think just think about the modulation of your voice, even if you're reading from a script. Like, you want to think about the best storytellers, the podcasts that you like to listen to, what really brings you in, and how do you tell that story? And then secondly, you guys are designers and creators, and every single thing you put out into the world, even a presentation, is an opportunity to show off those skills. So that means the transposition, like the composition of your slides, that alone could give you an edge. So just 2 things to consider in every presentation, resume. Even if you stay in traditional practice, you're going to have to go and interview with clients, and you're going to have to be able to tell that story and share it both through your language and visually. So I think that's just every single opportunity is a design opportunity.
Excellent points. Any other thoughts from Sharks?
I do. And I could keep it short. Know your numbers. Understand how money works, because no matter what you decide you want to do, whether you're starting your own architecture firm or you're working for a big company, or you take one of these the ideas that you've developed in this program and you move forward with them, understanding how money flows in and out of businesses and the large scale economic impacts all the way down to micro impacts in your pro formas and your profit loss statements and your balance sheets. Understand what those documents are and how they work, and you'll be a much more successful and a much happier architect as you move through your career, because a lot of architects don't know that even as they move through, and some never learn it, and they struggle their entire lives. And if you learn it now, even if you don't like it, learn it and understand it, you'll be much happier as you move through your career.
Other thoughts from Sharks?
Yeah, I'll add something. I'll just say, this for some will just be kind of an exercise, and congratulations, you finish, you get a grade, and life goes on. I would encourage many of you to actually take this forward, and I'll give you, speaking about numbers, $17,500 is what the average Design X graduate that goes into the traditional practice of their choice, whatever it is, planning, real estate, whatever, is what they make more than their peers who did not. Why? Because they actually know money, they know marketing, they know how to run a business. Heck, they know how much they need to pay themselves to stay alive, like to support their family, to have a roof over their head. Many of you probably don't know how much it actually will cost to keep you alive outside of school. So entrepreneurship is, even if anything, it's a great line on your resume, and particularly now that you're in school, you have time to do that. And I'll say, dollars and cents at Ball State, did you know that you could actually get $2,500 per individual per semester to support your business right now as a student? And it only takes a one sheet of paper application. So go to the Entrepreneurship Center. They have a link. It's the pre-seed funds. So for some of you who are interested in taking this forward, and it could be anything. Some of you are like, we still need to do the fundamental research. Heck, we don't even know in the communities who to talk to. That's what that pre-seed money is for. You can literally get paid. Well, you can't get paid, but you can use that money to build your ideas now, right? So get free money. Free money exists to do this. And what? You fail, what happens in the end? Nothing. You're worth more than your peers who didn't take this class this semester. I don't know. That sounds like a good investment personally. $17,500 per year more for doing some of this stuff sounds like a great investment to me. So.
And I'll say, I really appreciate everybody's presentations. It was exciting to hear your ideas, and I hope you take our feedback as just like encouragement and not criticism. It's interesting to me to be able to learn more about you through what you chose to focus on and what was interesting to you. That was as exciting as anything. And I think what the value you got out of this class, and hopefully you felt it, is that you learned how to take your design education that you're getting in studio and apply it to something else. And I promise you that's going to serve you so well, because if it's not a business, you can apply it to so many things in your career. Even if you want to just practice architecture, there's any opportunity to be a leader and think outside of the box is a good investment for your long-term career, because it's going to get you to your passion and where you want to go with your career long-term. So good job and congratulations, everybody.
Very good.
I'll
Thank
also
you.
Just to add one more thing.
Yep.
I applaud you, Jeff, for developing this program and having them work through this, because they may not have liked it while they were doing it, but later on in their careers, they'll look back at this course and they'll thank you for it.
I appreciate that. I'm going to give you one more. I'm going to give you, the class, one more story that I haven't told you yet. I did tell you several times at the beginning of our semester together, something very similar to what the Sharks have said, in that I really believe that understanding the things that I hope you understand now at the end of the semester makes you a more valuable employee, if nothing else. Also gives you a lot of opportunities, opens your eyes, hopefully, to opportunities that you can create for yourself. But I want to give you one story, and I'm not going to, especially since this is being recorded, I'm not going to tell you the school that I'm referring to. But I was at a university, a major university that has a college of architecture, and I had the opportunity to see the recruiting of the students in the school, from the school and talked to some of the firms that were recruiting these students. And then I had the opportunity to view the catalog of the work from that school, from the students in that school, and then sit at a dinner table with about 10 of the recruiters and just have a conversation with them. And it's a school with an incredible reputation for academic rigor. It's got an interesting reputation when it comes to their program. And so I was curious. I looked through the resumes, the portfolios, the work of those students, and saw what I saw. And this is completely judgmental, and I get that. But what I saw was a real deficiency in the experience of those students. Not only real world applications from school, but also their work environments, the things that they put on their resumes. And so when I was sitting at dinner with those professionals, those people that were actually there to recruit these students. Now, I do need to say that almost all of those recruiters were alumni from the school. So this is basically their alumni network at work. But I asked a couple of those recruiters, said, what do you see in these students? What's the payoff from recruiting specifically from this school? And some of the answers I got were, well, we know what we're getting. Of course you do. You're alumni of the school. You went through the same program. You know what they've gone through, et cetera. Somebody said, well, I trust that I can hand this project off at this phase of the project, and I know that they'll be able to carry through. Again, that goes back to what you're getting. But I really wanted to know, the question I really wanted to ask was, why would you hire one of these students? When I see these deficiencies, again, my perception, I see these deficiencies, why would you hire these students? I couldn't ask that, right? You can't sit there at the dinner table and just say, hey, what are you doing? So what I had to ask was, when you hire these students, at what point do you see value in them as employees? And at what point do you see them actually being able to take something on and contribute to your firm? However you interpret that. And the answer that I got back just shocked me. I said about 1.5 or 2 years before we see any of these students really being able to make any contribution to, that benefits our firm. I went, what a statement. We can't teach everything, right? We can't teach everything in academia. It just can't happen, right? It's called practice for a reason, right? You have to get out, you have to practice, you have to learn the real world. But learning some of the things that you could have learned in the semester and getting some of this experience that you could get through this process in the semester, I really believe puts you ahead, like Anthony said, of students in other programs, because you're getting real world out of this. You're thinking about real world things in these types of projects. And I really do think that you could go back to the firms that you've worked for and show real benefit and show real value to those firms, and not have somebody say, my gosh, it's 1.5 or 2 years before anything comes out of hiring any of these students. And I got to Jordan's point with the 5.1 years, and then to Evelyn's point with the Silicon Valley. I sat on a panel discussion where it was really a discussion of quote unquote millennials. And I've told you how much I hate that, that shoebox. But the study that they were citing was that millennials will stay in a job about 1.6, 1.7 years. If you came out of that school where I was having that conversation with those recruiters, and they say it's 1.5 or 2 years before they see any value from you, the student. what happens when you leave 1.6 years, right? They haven't seen any value in you at all at that point. And I think that's a real shame. I really hope that you're able to go out, be an employee, start your own thing, whatever you decide to do, and have immediate value for your firm, for your business, for those communities that you want to help, whatever it is that you decide to pursue. So, I hope that you can take that away, a small piece of that away from this class and this semester. And I really appreciate all the effort that you've put into these projects, and also your suggestions for speakers and everything else that you've done this semester. So thank you for that. All right, with that, like I said, I will save the chat because there's a lot of links in the chat box by now. I'll save that. I will send that to all of you via the inbox, and I haven't looked to see. Hopefully you've all taken your quiz by now. We'll get everything wrapped up, and I will get everything buttoned up as I'm required to do for your grades and everything else. And enjoy the holidays. Take care of yourself. Stay well, and enjoy time with those that you're closest to. And maybe I'll see you next semester. Thank you to all the Sharks for being with us tonight, hanging in there. I know it's been a long slog, but I appreciate all of you and those of you that spoke to the class as well, and really appreciate all of you as well.
It's nice to see your faces.
Yeah.
If you guys take your ideas forward, we want to hear about it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Can come be on our podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Very impressed with everyone. Great job.
And if there is anyone, or more than one or whatever, if you're curious about pursuing your idea, just shoot me a message, and we'll talk about that. We'll figure out a way forward.
Go get free money, apparently.
Yeah.
Anthony.
Yep. Anthony put the link in there. So again, thank you all. Have a great holidays, and I hope that we'll talk again soon.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.